What you're looking at is a Powolski preservation shelter. And believe it or not, this might be the biggest scam ever sold to the American people in the Fallout universe. Marketed as a life-saving personal bunker for surviving the inevitable nuclear holocaust, the Powolski shelter was supposed to be every man's ticket to salvation. But in reality, it was about as effective as putting a traffic cone over your head and praying that the bombs missed you. In the shadow of the Great War, amid rising tensions and the slow grinding descent of the United States into panic and propaganda, one company found a way to capitalize on fear by selling hope in a can, literally. To the average citizen of pre-war America, these shelters were advertised as compact, affordable, and reliable personal fallout protection. They stood proudly on street corners, in commercial districts, near shops and public squares. Their presence was a quiet reassurance that if the worst came to pass, you at least had a chance, a place to hide, a way to survive. But in truth, these shelters were never about safety. They were about illusion, about selling security to people who couldn't afford a Vault-Tec solution. And what they really offered was a steel coffin. Now, to understand just how absurd these things are, we need to go back, way back to the beginning where it all started. In the beginning, God said, "Let there be light." And we all know how that turned out. Adam and Eve ate the world's first radioactive fruit, a snake invented gaslighting, and humanity spiraled into a divine kill streak of chaos, war, and regrettable decisions. Thousands of years later, we were still setting the high score in self-destruction. We made fire, then swords, then bombs, and then the atomic bomb, and then whatever the fuck this is. Now, we didn't just stop there. We looked at what was basically the sun in a bottle and thought, let's drop that on some cities. And thus came the golden age of nuclear fear. Backyard fallout shelters, air raid drills where kids hid under desks like that would stop a 20 megaton blast, and an entire cottage industry of companies eager to monetize the apocalypse. Enter Powolski Preservation Services. Their pitch was simple. Vault-Tec might be too expensive for the average American, but what if you could have your very own budget bunker on the sidewalk? Just step in, drop a quarter in the slot, and wait for death to politely knock. Powolski Preservation Services was one of the many private companies that emerged during the final years of the American Republic, as government contracts and civil defense initiatives expanded rapidly. While Vault-Tec monopolized large-scale, long-term vault habitation, companies like Powolski targeted the lower-income public, those who had no chance of being selected for Vault-Tec's elite programs. The pitch was simple. For a small fee, just a quarter, you could access a personal shelter during a nuclear emergency. Step inside, close the hatch, and wait out the end of the world. But the reality was far more bleak. The shelters were built from thin layers of steel, just enough to endure surface-level stress, but completely ineffective against blast waves, radiation, and long-term exposure. There was no real filtration system, no reinforced lead lining, no food, storage, no water. At best, they might protect someone from shrapnel or smoke, and at worst, they were death traps locking people inside with no chance of escape or survival. Now, what were these shelters actually made of? Because that's where the scam really starts to shine. If you've ever looked at one and thought, hey, that doesn't seem very thick, congratulations, your instincts are very much on point. These things are made of layered steel about as thick as a lunchbox lid. It's evident by firing a simple handgun into it does nothing but penetrate it. So if a basic handgun round can turn your apocalypse pod into Swiss cheese, just imagine what an actual nuclear blast would do to it. And no, they didn't have any radiation shielding, no lead lining, no airtight seals, nothing to keep the toxic air out. If anything, they might have been better at trapping heat and radiation inside. Congratulations, you're not just dying, you're being slowly cooked in a steel oven. All those years of taunting your Thanksgiving turkey had finally caught up to you. He sold the illusion of safety while offering the structural integrity of a soda can. And still, people paid for them. People believed in them. That's the tragedy of it all. These weren't designed to protect. They were designed to look protecting. A psychological placebo wrapped in metal sold to people who had no idea they were buying their own grave. Today, if you travel through the ruins of Boston, you can still find some of them around. Rusting hucks of metal dotting the sidewalks, doors jammed open, lights still dimly flickering after 2 centuries, and skeletons curled inside in a final, desperate posture. Some shelters have their coin mechanisms broken, suggesting that people tried to enter in their final moment, frantically inserting quarters into machines that were no longer functioning. One shelter near Fallon's department store contains the remains of a civilian huddled in a corner, gas mask still strapped on long after the world had already ended. Even more disturbingly, these shelters weren't just forgotten relics. They were repurposed by survivors in twisted ways. Slaver settlements like Paradise Falls used old Powolski shelters for solitary confinement, renaming one simply the box. It became a prison, a place of punishment and psychological torment. A cruel irony for something originally sold as protection. There are no surviving records of Powolski preservation services, no corporate offices, no archived schematics, no survivors to tell the story. All that remains are the shells. These shelters stand as monuments to a society that sold false hope to the powerless, a symbol of how far corporate opportunism went in the final days before the apocalypse, and how deeply the world was lied to. In a way, they're more than metal tomes. They're confessions of a world that knew it was ending and chose to profit from the fear anyways. And that brings me to the day I met the love of my life. I stumbled across another preservation center near the waterfront. Curious as I ever was, I cracked the door open, and there he was, a 6'2" light-skinned mannequin. Not just any mannequin though, but a dead-eyed plastic Adonis. He stood in the dark like a discount Michael Fassbender, wearing a construction helmet and the kind of vacant stare that only comes from being manufactured in bulk. I locked eyes with him, and for a moment, I felt seen. There was something about Fred, something noble, tragic, sexy. He stood as a symbol of all the people who believed in the Powolski dream and got nothing but death and broken coin slots in return. I leaned in close. Our faces nearly touched. I whispered, "It didn't have to be like this." And then I kissed him passionately. And seconds later, he turned around. He turned because he felt something. Now, can you guess what I did to Fred next? A. Ferocious backshots. B. Ferocious backshots. And C. I asked him to subscribe to my channel. I'm sure you can all guess where this is going. After an emotional high wore off, I decided that it was time to put this shelter to the ultimate test. I loaded up a fat man and fired directly at it. Fred still inside. If this shelter could protect the only man I ever loved, maybe it was worth saving. I ran to the door, heart pounding, and opened it. Fred was still there, but to my horror, his head and arms were gone. Just a half-melted torso sitting quietly in the dim red glow. The silence was deafening. I picked up his hard heart, put it on my head, and it was time to say goodbye. I walked to the edge of the pier, helmet in place, eyes staring out over the irradiated sea. The wind swept across my face like Fred's cold plastic caress. I whispered to the water, "Fred, you deserved better." We all did. And then I jumped into the ocean, into grief, into a glowing soup of regret, and fish with extra limbs. Psych, I lived. Subscribe for Fred. And if you enjoyed the video, if you made it this far, just, want to say thank you. Not a lot of people really finish my videos, probably because, I have less than 1 million subscribers and all that, but I really appreciate it.